Well, one of the other things, and by the way, that's a really good defense of sound money in a modern world that's seeing, in, like you said, orders of magnitudes of increase in technology, which has the deflationary effects of falling prices and increased wages, I guess. The other argument of that is that we've gone so far that automation has made it that big sectors of the economy are going to be automated away, and that's going to cause a lot of unemployment. So I try to think about it not just from the Austrian point of view, but also from like the humanitarian point of view. And that's something that I wonder if you've thought that there could be some kind of mix between like some sort of fractional system, because you hear this a lot from proponents of universal basic income and stuff who talk about also the destructive effects of technology destroying like the entire trucking industry or something, say. And I for a long time I resisted it and said, well, just let the free market handle it, and that's but then I started to think that they may have a point, that it would just be chaos if half of the country was unemployed. There would be riots like all the time, and it would be just chaos in the streets, and there would be class wars, and it would get pretty bad if there was so much unemployment. So obviously the fractional reserve banking system that we've seen over the last 100 years we've been on a 100-year bull run in the stock market. Asset prices have bubbled up and continued to grow because of what you said earlier, which is the value of the dollar has dropped so much. So it appears that we've been growing, but we're actually shrinking purchasing power in actual purchasing power of goods and services. And fractional reserve banking has the Cantillon effect and increases the wealth gap, and the distribution of wealth has just gotten worse and worse with fractional reserve banking. And I wonder if there's a way to so the Gini coefficient is the way that you measure, the way that economists and stuff measure how unfair the wealth is distributed. And I wonder if there's a way to use fractional reserve combined with sound money to have a system that is going to be able to take care of those people that are going to be unemployed and unable to find work because of technology is going to get so far advanced that we won't have jobs for everybody. Have you thought much about that? Like, I wonder how a monetary historian, constitutional law guy like you would think about UBI or something like that, where we're in this reality.
Well, I haven't gone into all those details, but I look back at these. Take robotics, for instance. You have a corporate structure that says, all right, if we replace our human workers with robots, we're going to increase our efficiency and our bottom line at the cost of sending these people out into the street with no way to make equivalent incomes. Right? They've worked 10, 15 years in this line, and now we're replacing them with these machines. And they have no pensions, they have no alternatives. We don't have a system for retraining into some other. How are you going to take someone who's been basically a mechanic and turn him into a systems programmer overnight, right? And it also has all sorts of competition from others who are already coming up as youth and learning this in the high schools and the colleges. And the first thing I'd say to that is, well, corporations are artificial creatures of the law. They really have no authority that the law doesn't grant to them. In a sense, they have no rights of a constitutional nature. They have statutory rights, but the statutory rights are the creations of the states, or in some instances, the national government, maybe localities. So you look at a corporation that's attempting to do that and say, all right, well, we're going to control the timing of your putting in this new technology. We're going to control the rate of removal of employees that you have. We're going to require you to pay some kind of severance benefits to these people, or you're not going to be allowed to bring this technology online because this is increasing your bottom line while using them, taking away from them, all right? And in the long run, that's not so much of a burden to you because this is a small segment of the population And some of these people will be able to go out and be retrained to do something else, or they'll have some other way of dealing with themselves. But we're not going to have a kind of shock therapy for them. And you have no right to complain about this, because as a corporation, we can control you any bloody way we want. Oh, and by the way, you're not going to be able to go to China and do this and ship those goods back into the United States, because we're going to tax you severely for that. And we'll use that tax to pay these people that you put out of work. All right. Now, I wouldn't even call that socialistic, because it isn't socialistic. It's not the government taking over the area of production itself. It's the government regulating these corporations through a power that has always been recognized. Corporations don't have any authority of their own. Right? They're creatures of the state.
So it's not
So
that.
if you look at it that way, you say, well, there are things that and I'm just putting this out because I never heard anybody really say this. They take the position that, oh, well, the corporation can put this in, this is much more efficient, and to hell and high water with these people that they're going to fire. Let them become, computer programmers. Let them become, pilots, plane pilots. 45, 50 years old, you're not going to become a computer programmer. You're not going to become something else at a high level of technology where you're getting the same level of income. Right? That's not going to happen. So we're looking here. I want to come back to Marx, because Marx has been, Marx never said anything that was original. How does this go? What Marx said that was original was not right, and what Marx said was right was not original, right? But in this sense, there's something true about the corporate structure, the high bourgeoisie, exploiting the masses.
Mm-hmm.
And here we have the classic example of it. They're coming in and saying, oh, we have all this wonderful technology, and we're going to put this in and take you people, and we're going to throw you on the dustbin of history. And we don't care what happens to you. Right? Somehow or other, the welfare system is going to take care of you or whatever. We don't care what happens to you. Oh, and in fact, by the way, we're going to send some of these jobs over to China, and we'll actually expropriate the average Chinese too, because they're going to have robots working there as well. And one has to look at this and say, wait a minute. That's not really the free market, my friend, because a corporation is not really a free market enterprise. A partnership is, an individual corporation, an individual business is. A corporation is a creature of the state.
So, so I remember in your video, What is Constitutional Money, you talked about that, like, through history, governments always get involved in the money because they want to do redistribution of wealth. And it sounds like you're not saying the concept of redistribution of wealth by itself is bad. It's when the government is, how do you square that with, I like what you just said. It makes sense to me. It makes sense that there should be a solution there should be some sort of social safety net for people who are going to be out of work for no fault of their own. And like you said, they got automated out of a job and there's nothing for them. So is it like some sort of redistribution of wealth is okay, as long as the government's not stealing it from you? Or like, how do you look at it like that?
Well, it depends. I suppose it depends upon how you define redistribution of wealth. If you're coming along and saying we're giving a special legal privilege to a particular organization that we have created, the structure which we have created, this is how you're supposed to operate. Are we redistributing any wealth there at all? Well, they didn't exist before before they created their corporate charter. They're operating under these restrictions to begin with. Taxation, is that redistribution of wealth? Or we tax some people to give to the military-industrial complex because we need soldiers and tanks? I guess that's a form of redistribution of wealth. You can think of all sorts of situations along those lines, which I would hope most people would not criticize as being outside the power of even a quote-unquote limited government. Constitution provides for many of those. Now, of course, it comes into the situation where the problem arises is these corporations already have a charter that's been granted. They're already operating in a certain way. Can you come into that system and say, oh no, we're going to change the terms of this so that if you begin taking these kinds of actions, then these restrictions are going to apply to you? And all I'm saying is, well, as we said before, every corporate charter is subject to some provision somewhere back in the corporate statute that says we, the legislature, can change this thing any way we want at any point in time. Right? We can't unmake contracts you've already entered into, and so there's certain things we can't do, but we can constrain you and regulate you in some new way without your claiming that your corporate charter is somehow being violated on a constitutional level. And I think that all I'm suggesting is this is something that has to be looked into, because what's the alternative? Well, the alternative you're suggesting on the other side is, we use the Federal Reserve to expand the money supply and to provide monetary assets in the form of some kind of bailout, guaranteed annual income or whatever, to these people who have been made surplus by the corporations, which are now increasing their profits as a result of making these people surplus. And in doing that, we'll be undermining the stability of the whole monetary system, number one, because we're increasing the supply indefinitely. And number two, we're creating this class of people over here. What are they doing? Well, they're a kind of parasite class now. They're providing no real productive service. They're receiving money for doing nothing. They're spending that money, so they become the Keynesian consumer, right? They have the Keynesian system, we're still consuming. But they now become a class that has really no interest in the maintenance of certain kinds of stability in the system. In fact, they want to expand the power of government to give them more benefits.
Yeah,
now we run into that. We run into the problem of ochlocracy, right? The final collapse of democracy, when the democracy realized, when 51% of the voters realize that they can benefit themselves by looting the 49% through the government treasury. And will those people then turn around and demand further and further benefits coming from the Federal Reserve cornucopia? Why not?
Yeah, there definitely seems like there has to be something in the middle. Like, we can't just allow 50% of the population to be unemployed, but we also can't just MMT, modern monetary theory, to me makes no sense, because it's just and it's gaining mainstream attention among economists, and you hear the Federal Reserve talking about it now. It seems like we're in a modern monetary theory system right now, the way they're printing, what is it, 10% of the money supply? It just inflated 10% in the last year, I think.
And I guess at least, right, if you believe their figures, right?
And then, like, if we had to make the choice between taking that $6 trillion and bailing out government, banks and corporations, or taking $6 trillion and giving everybody in America free health care and like a basic income and stuff, I think most people are going to say, yeah, let's do the UBI, right? The problem is you can't just keep doing that. And there has to be a solution there somewhere that's kind of somewhat in the middle. Otherwise, it feels like it's going to be riots and looting and lawlessness.
You go back to the Industrial Revolution situation with the Luddites, right? Who threw the sabotage, right? In France, I guess, they threw the wooden shoes into the textile machines or the other machines, right? Because as the machines were being brought in, a certain percentage of the workforce was being removed from employment. But technology was moving much more slowly then. So some of those people could be absorbed in some other way. They could be retrained because they didn't have to go to such a high level of education for the next step in technology. So we come back to the whole problem, what about the bloody schools in this country? All right. I mean, I used to litigate against unions all the time, and National Education Association was one of them, American Federation of Teachers, the National Education Association was the major one. Those people have destroyed American education. And you have to factor that into the situation as well. Could you take people out of certain industries now because of the addition of robotics or whatever? And there's some training mechanism that could prepare them to get some job, maybe not at the same level of income immediately, but at least to tide them over, and then they could move up. And the answer is, well, probably not, because they've destroyed the educational system as well. All of these things are coming together. Technology is moving extremely fast. The educational system is not keeping up with it. The structures that used to exist for protecting the average worker, the unions, are in bed with the politicians instead of being concerned with their own members. And I know that I've litigated with those people for years. The politicians really don't care. The big corporations don't care. Everybody expects he's going to be bailed out by the monetary cornucopia of the Federal Reserve System. And where does that lead?